Hello, my name's Kingsley Singleton and welcome to this Photoshop and Elements video lesson. One of the greatest ways that you can convey a sense of speed in your photos is with a panning shot. A style of picture where the moving subject remains sharp but the background blurs. And though this is normally achieved in camera, as you'll find out in this tutorial, it's also possible to do in Photoshop or Elements. As you'll see, if you follow along with this lesson, applying the effect means that you can turn a static shot, or one where the background isn't quite as blurred as you'd like it to be, into one with the perfect amount of movement. And although my layers palette over here on the right hand side looks a little bit complicated, no special tools or advanced features are needed to perform this trick. This means the effect can be achieved in any version of Photoshop or Elements, and all you really need is a steady hand and an eye for detail. Put them all together and you'll end up with some really stylish panning shot pictures. So let's see what we're going to do in this lesson. First of all, we start off with our background image. That's our regular starting point, our photo where the background wasn't quite blurred enough. We then make a copy of the car, blur the original background, add some shadows on the road just to tie everything together, then add in the two aerials that were on the car originally, and finally we use a layer of digital noise just to make sure that there's some real consistency between the sharp areas and those that have been blurred. As I say, it may look like a lot, but work through it step by step and you'll see that it's really easy. Let's start doing that right now, just by closing down our example image and bringing up the start picture. That's called rally.jpg, which you'll find on the disk. Now, the first thing I want to do before we start with any of the digital panning trickery is just clean up our original image a little bit using the clone stamp tool. If we just zoom in a little bit, you'll see that here in the background we've got this red rope at the trackside, and although this area is all going to blur, it may look a little bit unsightly in the final image, and it's going to be a lot more difficult to remove once it's blurred. So before we do anything else, let's get rid of it. First, just click on the clone stamp tool over there in the toolbox. We'll set its size to about 80 pixels. Make sure the hardness is set to 0, and if you don't have a hardness slider, just pick one of these softer brush previews and then drop the size accordingly. That should be okay. Then, before we start cloning, just make sure that your opacity is up at 100%, and now to get rid of that offending rope, we'll just press down the Alt key on the keyboard, click the mouse button to select a clean area of the background, and then we'll just start painting away those areas that we don't want. Now, as I said, we're going to blur all this area, so you don't need to be too kind of accurate with it. Just keep on sampling and painting away the rope until it's completely disappeared. So that's what we'll do, just working along this part of the image. And when we get near to that windscreen, we don't want to clone over that, so we'll just zoom in nice and tight there, drop our brush size, and also increase the hardness of our brush, just using the Shift key and the right square bracket key on the keyboard. Just bring that up to about 90% hardness, sample again, and then we'll just clone right up to the edge of that window. That should be okay. So just holding down the spacebar on the keyboard and using the hand tool to navigate around, we'll just continue to clone away that offending rope, and just keep on going until we reach the edge of the image, at which point we should be done with our cloning. And there we are. Come back out to a full view. Our rope has conveniently disappeared, so now we can get on with the next stage of the panning technique. So what I'm going to do now is first make a copy of our cleaned up layer just by pressing Ctrl and J on the keyboard, and there immediately in the layers palette you'll see an exact copy appears as layer 1. If you can't see your layers palette, just come up to Window and down to Layers. And the next thing we want to do so that we can apply our blurring effect to the background is separate the car from it. We're going to do this by making a selection of it. So come over to your toolbox again, pick the polygonal lasso tool, and then before we do anything else, up here in the options bar, just make sure it's set to new selection, that feather is at 0 pixels, and that anti-alias is ticked. Then we can zoom in nice and close on our car, give ourselves a bit more room around the picture there, and we can just start by clicking and working our way around the very edge of the car. Just nice and slowly, don't click too fast, working our way up the windscreen there. Don't worry about these aerials at this stage, because what we're going to do is add them back in later in a way that'll mean that they don't kind of blur in a rather unsatisfactory way. Just continue working along the roof all the way down to the back, just missing out that second aerial. And because it's going to take me a couple of minutes just to click all the way around the edge of our rally car here, I'll join you in a moment. Okay, so here we are, having worked all the way around the outside of the car here. Around the bottom you can see I've been a little bit kind of slapdash, just kind of cut straight along the shadow area there, because we'll be evening up that area a little bit later on. As I said, we've missed out the aerials too, no point selecting them at this stage, but what you will notice is that down here at the back of the rally car we have this kind of spoiler thing, and through it we can see a bit of the background. Obviously that means we need to kind of continue our selection around this area too. So to do that, just make sure that you've got the polygonal lassos still selected, and then up in the options bar give the subtract from selection icon a click. What happens when you do that is you get a small minus sign right next to your polygonal lasso icon there, and it just means that we can continue to click around any areas that we want to remove from our selection, just like so. And when we get back around to the starting point again, we've managed to amend that selection perfectly. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is copy our selected motor car so that we can blur that background independently. Before we do that though, we just want to make a couple of refinements to our selection. So it's up to select, down to modify, and first pick the option called contract. Now we're going to contract this selection by 1 pixel and click OK, and that just gives us kind of a slightly tighter selection there, just hopefully losing any parts of the background that we might have accidentally selected over. And then to give us an ever such a slightly soft edge to our selection, it's back up to select, down to modify, and pick feather. In here we're going to use a feather radius of 0.5 pixel, and that's just going to make sure that the edge of the selected area isn't too hard, and the results look a bit more photorealistic in our final panning shot. So once you've done all that, it's time to copy those selected pixels to a new layer, and once again we'll do that by pressing Ctrl and J on the keyboard. Another new layer appears in our layers palette, this time layer 2, but this time, because we made a selection first, you can see that only the pixels of the car have been copied, and all of those areas around it, those ones covered by that checkerboard effect, they're all empty. There are no pixels there at all. What this means is in all of those checkerboard areas we can see through to the layer below. So when I click on it and come up to filter, down to blur, and pick motion blur, you'll see that all the pixels on our car layer remain sharp, while those in the background behind take on that blurring look. Let's just bring our dialog box over to the side so we can get a better view of what's happening. And in this case we're going to set the angle to about -3 and the distance to about 250 pixels. Click OK to blur that layer, and then if we come out to a wider view again, you can see that our panning shot picture is really starting to take shape. We've got our sharp car and our blurred background, and that's all thanks to separating them in the layers palette. There's our original, of course, with its static background, there's our blurred background, and there's our sharp car. The trouble is, because we've smeared all the pixels around on layer 1, that's the layer that we blurred, we've caused this kind of fringing halo effect around the edge of the car. That doesn't look very realistic for a panning shot. It looks more like it's kind of shaking backwards and forwards. And if you see this in another panning shot, it's a bit of a dead giveaway. What we need to do is get rid of this fringing somehow, and the way that we're going to do that is first by enlarging the size of the sharp car. To do this, click back on it in the layers palette. It'll turn blue when it's highlighted. And then to enlarge the pixels on this layer, hold down the Control key on the keyboard and press T. That'll enter free transform mode, and you'll get a bounding box all the way around the pixels on that layer. What we're going to do is enlarge these pixels, but before we do that we want to make sure that we're constraining the proportions of the enlargement we're making so that we don't have a sort of a skewed and an unrealistic looking car. And the way that we'll do that is just by clicking on the chain link icon up here, the maintain aspect ratio icon. In Elements it's called Constrain Proportions, So make sure you give that a click, and then we'll just click and drag out these corner handles just until the car kind of overlaps that fringing effect. Taking it up to something around 110% up there in the options bar should do the trick. Yeah, that's looking pretty good, so we can hit the tick to complete that transformation. Now that's starting to look really good to me. We've got our nice sharp car and our blurred background, no fringing around the edge, and it's really looking like it's kind of zipping along that track. There are a few things we need to sort out though, and the first of them involves the shadow under the car. It's a little bit choppy at the moment, so let's zoom in and take a look at what we can do about that. The problem here, of course, is that as we've resized and repositioned those pixels, they no longer match up with the original layer, so therefore we need to create a new shadow. Again though, we want to keep it separate from our background and from our car, so we're going to do it on a new layer. So let's come up to Layer, down to New and pick Layer. We're going to call this one Shadow. Click OK. And then before we start painting in our new shadow, just click and drag that down in the Layers palette underneath Layer 2. Of course that's because we don't want to be painting our shadow above our car, we want it to sit below the pixels on that layer. And to paint in the shadow, we're just going to use the brush tool, so give that a click in the toolbox. Set the brush size down at about 200 pixels, make sure that it's got a nice soft edge. Then, making sure that the foreground colour is black, or at least a very dark tone that matches the road, and the opacity is down at 10%. We'll just gradually paint into the layer until we get a sort of a more realistic shadow. Just taking away that hard edge too. That's looking okay, so we'll do it behind the wheel as well. And eventually with a few clicks of the brush, we get a nice realistic look. Of course, if you're in any doubt about where your shadow needs to be, just unclick these layer visibility icons, take yourself all the way back to that original background layer, and you'll get a better idea of where you need to paint. So that's looking pretty good to me. We'll again hold down the space bar on the keyboard to bring up the hand tool, and we'll just kind of do the same on the rear wheel there, just evening up that join with the background. That's looking pretty good. And then checking our original shadow again. It's just kind of coming ever so slightly out behind that wheel and under the rear mud flap, so we can just paint that into until we give the impression that it's kind of grounded on the road. Okay, so that's kind of looking okay, I think. What we're also going to do while we're here is just select the eraser tool from the toolbox and just use it to smooth out any rough areas under the car. So we'll pick a 200 pixel size soft edge brush there. Make sure that our opacity is up at 100%. Then zoom in a bit so we can see there's a bit of a hard edge there. What we'll do is drop that brush size, and then making sure that we're on layer 2, which is our sharp car, just click a few times just to kind of soften that edge. And it looks like I've just gone a little bit too far, so we'll just hit Control and Z there. Just drop the brush size a bit and sweep it up under that wheel there. Okay, so coming back out to a full view, our rally car certainly looks a lot more grounded than it did without the new shadow that we've added there, just clicking it on and off in the layers palette so you can see what I mean. And with that done, we can turn our attention to those aerials that we missed out from our original selection. So let's kind of zoom in roughly on that area, just doing the central aerial first, and then we'll make those layers invisible again, taking us all the way back to the background layer, and to select that, give it a click in the layers palette. Then it's back over to the polygonal lasso tool, and using the same settings as before, just making sure that new selection is pressed down there in the options bar and that we've got 0 feather. Let's just zoom in a little bit tighter and we can make a quick selection of that aerial. Just very quickly sweeping up there with the polygonal lasso around the top and back down the other side. Once again, not clicking too fast as we go, and back round to our starting point. When the marching ants appear, we want to do exactly the same as when we made our original selection of the car, barring the contraction of our selection. So this time we'll just feather it ever so slightly, come up to select, down to modify and pick feather, use that same setting of 0.5 pixels, and then it's Control and J again on the keyboard just to copy those selected pixels. Now there layer 3 appears in the layers palette. We can't see anything on it because the amount of pixels on that layer is very small, but if I just click and drag that up to the top of the layers palette and then turn our other layers back on, you can see that it appears there above the sharp car. Not quite in the right position though, so let's use the move tool there in the toolbox to just click and drag it up kind of roughly where we want it. And as we enlarge the car, it's also a good idea to enlarge the aerial. So Control and T again on the keyboard. This time we'll come straight up to the options bar and just put in an amount of 110% for each. Hit return on the keyboard to make that transformation, and then click and drag it into position. And that's looking pretty good to me, so we'll come back out for a wider view again. And there we've got our nice sharp aerial to go with the rest of our sharp car. So I'm going to repeat that procedure with the smaller front aerial here, and I'll join you in a moment. And so here we are, just moving our second aerial into position. That looks about right there. And it's just a nice little kind of piece of attention to detail that we've done there. And it's a lot easier than selecting them when you originally select the car. So coming back out to a wider view there, we've got our nice little aerials now. So it's just time for a quick check around the image to make sure that our work is looking really good. One place where I have noticed a problem is just under the rear spoiler here. So we'll zoom in on that area, and you can see that the blurred car that's on our original background is just showing through under the cutout that we made. To get rid of this, we want to click back onto layer 1, that's our blurred car and background. Select the clone stamp tool again in the toolbox there, and then just as we did with that original offending red rope in the background, just hold down the Alt key to sample a clean area and paint over that part of the image that we want to remove. And just like that, there it goes, and the whole thing's looking a lot better. We'll just work our way around the outside of the car just to make sure that all that's looking good too. Looking okay to me. So we'll come back out to a full view. And for the final stage of the technique, we're just going to add a noise layer just to tie the blurred and unblurred parts of the image together. This is really important because all digital images contain a small amount of noise, which you'll see just as a slight texture even on smooth areas of colour. What happens is, when you blur one area, you smooth out all that noise, but if you've got sharp unblurred areas in the shot, those remain a little bit noisy. So just by adding a kind of a very subtle blanket of noise over the whole picture, we just tie those areas together. To do it, just click back on the top layer in the Layers palette, then come down to the Create New Layer icon, give that a click. We get a new blank layer in our Layers palette, and now we want to fill this with grey. So come up to Edit, down to Fill, and pick grey from the list under Contents there. 50% grey is the one we want. Click OK to fill all of that layer with grey. Then we'll add some noise to the proceedings. Come up to Filter, down to Noise and pick Add Noise. Just a relatively small amount of about 10% will be fine. Set the distribution to Gaussian and make sure that it says monochromatic, because we don't want to be adding any nasty sort of colour noise into our picture. Just a little bit of texture. Click OK to exit that palette. And then to make our panning shot show through, come up to where it says Normal, give the downward facing arrow a click and pick Linear Light from the list. And there, as if by magic, it pops through. We just zoom in on the image a little bit. You can see the noise effect is probably a little bit too pronounced. So up here at the top of the Layers palette, we'll click and drag that opacity down to about sort of 20 or 30%. Let's just settle on 25 there. And that just gives us a subtle sprinkling of noise over the whole picture, just tying those blurred and unblurred areas together. We'll come back out to a full view again, and we're all done with our digital panning effect. That layers palette might have looked a bit intimidating at the start of the tutorial, but as you'll have seen, it's very quick and easy to build up the individual layers until they come together into the finished image. Of course, if you want to retain all of these different layers and come back to the image at a later date to keep working on it, you'll need to save it as a Photoshop file. That's a PSD file, just to retain all those layers. But in this case, because I think we're all finished here, we can come up to Layer and down to Flatten Image. So make sure you give this digital panning effect a try, either to add a little bit of extra movement to panning shots you've already got, or to turn static images into moving masterpieces. You'll find it's really quick and simple to do, and it looks great. Okay, hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time.